Hi, it's literally the first day of school for me here in Michigan. I have two things that I want to talk about with you today. The first thing is I want to kind of give you a demo of how you can make guided notes work for you if you're using a Smartboard or a Promethean board. And the second thing that I'd like to do is just show you spatially in a classroom what rows look like, rows of desks versus pods of desks or groups of desks. So many of you are using Brian Passwater's guided notes for Unit 1. Brian Passwater is awesome, and I love literally everything that he creates. It's been so helpful for all of us that he's put so many guided notes and worksheets out there. But what I wanted to focus on was how you can use different materials to make notes for either your Smartboard or your Promethean board or whatever it is that you're using notes for. So I use a Smartboard, and so I just kind of wanted to show you side by side how I used a lot from Brian Passwater's 1.1 change in tandem notes, but I also kind of added some more color and some more things to my Smartboard notes. So I started off by saying, what is a function? So I'm assuming that the students have some prior knowledge. And so if I just say, what is a function? I just kind of at this point want to brainstorm with students, telling me what they think is a function and kind of trying to lead them into that vertical line test. So the next question here, what is a way you can test to see if a relation is a function? And hopefully they'll remember the vertical line test. I also, though, snipped a little example of how the vertical line test can work for you. Now, if I go back to Brian's notes, it's important to remind the students that the vertical line test may not always work. That's the note here. And so I'm going to pop back here. So you're kind of reminding the students what is a function, reminding them of the vertical line test, and that was a way that they could test to see if a relation was a function. And then I like to pull things out sort of one at a time when I'm doing my Smartboard notes, just because I feel like if they can see everything at once, they're not quite thinking as much as if I just give them little pieces of information at a time. So after we have this discussion about the vertical line test and what makes a relation a function, now I'm kind of giving them some, definitions. And I'm telling the students on the first slide of day 1 of notes in AP Pre-Calc that the vocabulary here is going to be inputs and outputs. So instead of talking about X's and Y's, we're talking about inputs and outputs, sometimes domain and range. And if I could just kind of go back to how these guided notes have the same information, the set of input values of a function is called the blank, represented by the blank variable. So this is just a way that I've digested it in these Smartboard notes. Now here I'm using verbatim the same example that Brian Passwater has in his notes. So for example 1, sketch a graph from -4 to 4 for the function using these, or for the function rules in parts A and B. And here's part A. I snipped this from Brian's worksheet. And then I have part B also snipped from Brian's worksheet. So I'm really using Brian Passwater's notes here. I'm just making it more to what my students are more used to, I guess, which is the Smartboard notes. Okay, so you can see that these two examples are right here at the bottom of this first page in Brian Passwater's guided notes. Now, in Brian's notes, he goes on to talk about, to define what increasing, decreasing behavior is, concave up and concave down. So I kind of digest this in my Smartboard files and talked about, this isn't the same function that Brian had in his notes. It's another function that I snipped, but I said, here is an example of an increasing function. Why is it increasing? And at this point, I'm hoping again that the students will kind of just talk about, I guess, colloquially what they think is an increasing function, and see if I can get them all to come to kind of a consensus here, before I give them this definition. And notice how I like to pull things out. I feel like if I things out one at a time, they tend to take more notes. They tend to write down the things that are more important, rather than if I just put it all on the board at once. So here I'm saying that a function is increasing when, as the input values increase, the output values increase. So this is the same definition that we have in Brian's notes, just kind of, giving the students a little bit at a time in the Smartboard notes. And then likewise, then we're going to look at a decreasing function. Now here in my example of a decreasing function, I used a different decreasing function. I wanted to get away from using a linear function as an example for both increasing and decreasing. I know that my students have seen exponential functions before, so I didn't think it would be too crazy to show them this as an example for g of x, and talking about how g of x is a decreasing function. And again, I just want to kind of brainstorm. What do you think it means to be decreasing before I give them the formal definition? A function is decreasing when, as the input values increase, the output values. And that's when we're going to define what it means to be decreasing. And furthermore, we're going to add to that by using this notation here. If A is less than B, then F of A is greater than F of B. And here we're going to be talking about inputs and outputs rather than X's and Y's, or kind of scaffolding the X's and Y's to the vocabulary of inputs and outputs. And just to show you where this is basically everything in these first two, the increasing and decreasing here in this great chart that Brian put together. Okay, next, back to the Smartboard. I haven't talked about concavity yet, so I switched the page, and this is just something else that I pulled off the internet. I know the last time my students talked about concavity in math class was in geometry. At least I think so. So I'm just reminding them of, first grade math when they talked about the difference between concave and convex. And we'll just kind of talk about what made it concave. But are these figures functions? No. So at this point in 1.1, we're not really getting too deep into the whole rate of change thing. That's coming up in the next couple of sections. Right now in 1.1, we're just kind of saying, okay, well, you remember what it means to be concave? Well, here's some example of concave up and concave down in polynomials. And again, I don't want to get too deep in here. I think my students will intuitively be able to pick out where functions are concave up and concave down, and we'll get deeper into that in the next couple of sections. And then I pop over to example 2. Here's the graph of h of x. Use the graph to determine where h has the following behaviors. And these 4 questions here, A through D, this is the same graph, and it's the same questions that are posed in the guided notes. So there's the h of x function. There's the same questions. Actually, I missed D and E, so I'm going to add those: increasing and concave down, decreasing and concave up. I'm going to add those. So then the last example, I'm going to have the students work on in their tables. Now, I bought some Post-it notes that look like the XY axis. And so I'm just going to walk around and give each student one Post-it note, so they can talk with the people at their table, but sketch the graph of K according to this criteria. And again, this is exactly the same example, except I just kind of snipped some things and retyped some things. So the same example as example 3 in Brian Passwater's notes. So then, we'll have some discussion about that, and then we'll end up with their guided practice and maybe an exit ticket. If you're considering moving your desks in groups, but you're wondering spatially what that would look like, I recorded myself going from 37 desks in rows to groups of 3 and one group of 4, just so you could see what it looks like. I think there's enough room for me to move around in the classroom, and I'm gonna kind of show you how I set it up. To show you what I did with the groups of desks. So I got some table numbers. They were pretty inexpensive online. And so when the students come in, I'll have a random group generator that tells them which group to sit at. And then just for opening day activity, I gave each group one marker and asked them to, as a group, make a picture of something fun that they did this summer. And so that was kind of nice, just to break the ice of getting the kids up and working on the white books, so that when we start doing some math problems, they'll kind of have some experience on writing on them and working in groups. Well, I hope your first few days of school have gone really well, particularly in AP Pre-Calculus. I'd like to send a special thank you out there to Brian Passwater for allowing me to use his 1.1 notes as an example today. Also want to thank all of you that are creating worksheets and guided notes and other things that you're putting out there for the rest of us to use, making life a lot easier for we AP Pre-Calc teachers. Please keep in mind that if you are using worksheets that you are not the author of, that you keep the original author's name on those worksheets. And also, if you are, like me, creating notes to use with your students and you're pulling from various resources, that's fine. That's what, good teachers do. But please do not then share those notes that you've made, which is kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of different resources. Don't put that out there onto the internet as if you created these notes. Just kind of keep that within your classroom, within your school, etc. If you're trying something new regarding your student seating arrangements, I'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to send me a message on Messenger or an email. Let me know how things are working out, if you're trying new groups of 3 or something else. Make sure you follow my YouTube channel and have a great week.